entire side of the industry, like you pointed out on YouTube and some other places, where hype is built up that is not hype being built up by the manufacturer. We don't typically stick to we have to have a camera out every 2 years, every year, every 6 months, like any of that stuff, because that actually is counterintuitive to innovation. Build it so that it serves the user and isn't something that is wholly just about making money. The next Lumix camera that we've got coming is...
Welcome back to yet another episode of the Lumix Creators Podcast. In today's episode, we are sitting down with the legend himself, Sean Robertson. Now, if you don't know, or you've been living under a rock of who Sean is, he is the man behind the Lumix Live, the marketing and everything with the Lumix USA Instagram page and all that good stuff. So in today's episode, we're going to be kind of diving into talking about, some of the new features with the S9, the marketing, and kind of how he got into working with Lumix himself as one of the marketing directors. But without further ado, introducing Sean. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going, man?
It's good. I'm stoked that we can actually finally sit down and have a conversation. I was most excited to get you on the show today.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I guess, a good thing when I actually reply to your text message about doing this, isn't it?
It's okay. You're a busy man. That I gave you the briefest introduction, kind of like who you are, what you kind of do, but like kind of introduce yourself for the 10% of people that might not know who Sean from Lumix is. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm Sean Robinson. I am now the senior social media marketing person here at Lumix USA. I'm a photographer, videographer, first and foremost. I was lucky enough to be able to get the opportunity to work at a camera company, and when I had my choice where to work, I was incredibly fortunate enough to be able to get an opportunity to work here at Lumix. And actually coming up on in April of 2025, it'll be 10 years that I've been working here. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird these days. Yeah.
So these are typical questions that I ask like every guest that comes on the podcast. Now it's going to be a little bit different because you actually have been working at Lumix for a long time. But how did you kind of get into the Lumix ecosystem? What was that first Lumix camera? And then, what was it like starting working at Lumix 10 years ago now, almost?
Yeah. It's interesting because before I worked for Panasonic and Lumix, I actually worked in photo retail. So I was a salesman, I was a buyer. I was the guy at the store that basically managed what of the Lumix equipment we were going to be bringing in and stocking and selling and all that kind of stuff. So to pinpoint like what my first Lumix camera was is a bit difficult because I was in an incredibly unique position that I had access to all of them at the time. And this was around the GM1, GM5, the GH3, GH4 era that I really got involved with the products. But the first Lumix camera that I actually purchased myself was a GH4. Like I think a large majority of people, that's probably what their first camera was when they're in the higher end side. Had the opportunity, wanted to make a change. I was in college at the time, and a position opened up at Lumix to be able to work in business development. Which basically meant I was working trade shows and kind of collaborating with at that time, the Luminary program, which evolved to our ambassador program, which has evolved to an even bigger thing now. And yeah, just basically spent a couple of years working with the various different teams, working with our merchandising, our marketing, our sales team, to the basic point that I got promoted into marketing at first, where I started handling social media. Then probably another year or so later, I moved over into our merchandising side, which is basically product development, product planning, that kind of side, which is where I really got a good close level of communication with our teams in Japan. Shortly after that is when we kind of got towards me getting a little bored, wanting to change things up a bit. I also wanted to move out of New Jersey at that point, so I took a sales position within the company and moved down here to Austin, Texas, just before the entire world shut down. And that kind of leads to what I do today, which is, Lumix Live, working with creators like yourself, because out of necessity, my job up until that point was to be the person that would go into photo stores and teach classes and, kind of work with photographers and videographers. That ceased to exist when we weren't able to travel. So I pitched the idea to my bosses at the time and was like, hey, no one else is doing a YouTube, live back and forth conversation. Anytime you see them, they're kind of super sporadic. Let's actually create a weekly live event kind of thing for everybody. And it all grew out of that concept of, well, if we're not going to be able to be in stores and talking directly to photographers, there's that massive outlet that is no longer there, being able to ask a question to someone who knows the answer. So transition that online, and here we are 5.5 years later, I believe. Still doing it. Trying to keep it still weekly. It's been a little difficult this year. I've had a lot of overlapping events and things that meant I had to do some recorded sessions. But yeah, that's kind of the encapsulated point of where I am, what I do, and yeah. Outside of it, I also just love playing with the cameras and photographing, and yeah.
Good job. So we'll put a pin in that conversation about the Lumix Live, because I have a couple more kind of just further questions about that. But now, since you do shoot on every single Lumix camera that basically exists, what is your personal favorite Lumix camera and why?
If I had to pick one, like absolutely only one camera, it is the S5 Mark II X as my, if I can only have one camera, that's the camera. And it's really just because, like, I was part of the conversations when we were developing that camera. I was in with our teams in Japan. We were talking about all the ideas that we had for what we wanted to do with it. And I feel partially responsible for the totally blacked out design, along with a couple of the other members that we have that were part of those conversations. So I feel that that was a product that has at least some of my, legitimate input that was received and worked on from the engineering team. And yeah, it's a solid all around camera. When I want to go photograph motorcycles, because I love riding motorcycles, the camera performs beautifully for it. When I want to travel, I'm not one of those people that needs an ultra small compact camera to travel with. I come from the film era, so I'm used to carrying like a bag with me that has a camera and a couple lenses. So yeah, it kind of just fits everything that I need. If I have to pick one camera.
If you had to pick one. What's the second and third then?
The second is the S9, actually.
Yep.
I know that that's probably a bit of a controversial, probably pick from a lot of people. Yeah, but so like it's like I said, I am primarily a photographer. Yes, I know a decent amount about video. I know how to, do basic color grading. I know the concepts of filmmaking. I'm horrible at storytelling when it comes to like a narrative piece, but I know the technical side of all of it. But I love the S9 because of just what it does and what it frees me up to do for photography. I don't have to think about that camera. With that one, it's like 99% of the time I'm shooting in JPEGs. So I really don't ever think about, I really need to bring this into software and, mess with the RAW and really kind of pull that out. And that's fun. It's just, I guess, as I've grown, in my photography and obviously in life as we all grow, I just don't care about having to edit and everything needing to be technically absolutely perfect. Yeah. And that camera just gives me the fun time to go out and shoot with it, especially with a new puppy. I don't want to carry a ton of stuff around all the time, and sometimes I just want a camera that I can take some snapshots when he's being ridiculously cute. Third camera is probably another controversial one, but that's actually the G100D. Yeah. And that one is specifically because if I'm riding my motorcycle, and I like to always have a camera with me at all times. If I'm riding my motorcycle, I can just throw the G100D in my bag, in like the saddlebag, and kind of just leave it there. for a situation that may come up, if there's a problem, if I'm riding through a beautiful countryside and I just don't want to use my phone for the photos. That one kind of sits there and hangs out. It used to be the LX100 Mark II, but I wanted to go interchangeable at that point.
So I guess kind of now backtracking just a little bit, you kind of explained how the Lumix Live started. COVID, talking to creators, getting a conversation going. And I feel like Lumix is one of the only brands that are out there that's actually really trying to talk to the consumer as much as possible, especially on a weekly basis, but then also on Instagram, creating more relatable content. I remember the video I think Connor did of like oh, here are my babies, and it's like using from some audio from the one movie Surfer something.
Yeah,
I don't remember the Surfer Penguins, but kind of how has Lumix Live evolved over the time span of getting it better over time, answering better questions, and just different things like that.
When Lumix Live first started, obviously it was a pretty well protected set of things I was allowed to talk about. It's a new outlet. It is a platform where if I mess up and I say something I'm not supposed to, or basically just do something I'm not supposed to, it's an official platform for Panasonic Lumix. Anything we say there is an official statement. It is something that comes from the brand. So there was a period where I kind of had to prove myself that I can work within the lines, but also that I can provide reasonable information for anyone that tunes in. And as it kind of grew, our team in Japan, our merchandising teams, our marketing teams, they started giving me a lot more slack to be like, hey, we trust that you're, commenting in good faith, that you're making sure that, we're not providing poor information to users. And as it's evolved over time, that also meant it went from, my bedroom being where I was doing these broadcasts from, to an actual, kind of home office studio kind of setup. And outside of the technical things that have kind of improved, by switching to, like, I stream on an S5 Mark II. Aside from the technical things, there hasn't really been that big of a core change to Lumix Live. A lot of times, stuff like this, like you start to chase trends, you start to chase like, what can I say to just like massively get huge following and all that stuff. And that's not my goal with it. My goal is to actually be a resource for people. So I get to stick to that. I don't have to, chase too much, like how many subscribers can I get? And it allows us to, I feel, be a lot more authentic with everybody. And I hate that phrase, but, again, it just goes back to that. The whole purpose of the program is to give everybody that is interested in Lumix or owns Lumix a platform to actually talk to us and not have to deal with emails or text messages or a forum full of people that are guessing at what an answer would be for something.
And I feel like it's like you mentioned, it's like how you were in that sales position, many years ago, probably it feels like to you. Yeah. And now you are able to answer the people's questions in a digital way that's going to be not only getting to the masses way more than what the original photography trade show positions, which there's still a nice place and time for that. Yeah. Like trade show events, NAB is a great place to come up and ask questions. Also just meet people in real life is great. And then getting feedback questions like, okay, but what about this? Showing it hands-on. A lot of great benefits there, but it's also kind of nice because now you can answer those questions probably way faster than way before. Like you said, emails, people DMing probably Instagram all the time, asking specific questions. You're like, just hop on the live stream, tag Lumix USA during the live stream, put your question, and your answer will basically be there. Now, one other thing that Lumix is known for in the context of viewers, we are filming this episode literally the day after the Lumix S9, S5 II, the S5 IIX, the G9 Mark II, the big firmware updates. Lumix is well known for kind of firmware updates on a lot of their cameras. And these are cameras that come out 2 years later, almost at this point for some of these cameras. Why do you think that Lumix is so focused on long-term camera firmware updates instead of just releasing a new model?
So, I mean, there's different philosophies on how to handle product, like hard goods, right? And it used to be that the way products were developed, and for some this is still true, the way products used to be developed, at least in our case years ago, was that you basically built a product, you would release it, and the specs that it had were pretty much all that that hardware could do. As time moves forward, you know, companies, especially with us, we start looking at this saying like, well, we have a number of aspirational ideas where we potentially maybe want to bring these products in the future. So development of things like processors and the sensors and, you know, the thermal management, which obviously is a big thing for us, is, you know, how do we build a product that has a longer, I don't want to say shelf life, but has like a longer digital life.
Yeah.
And fully understand that cameras are expensive. You know, this is not a throwaway product. So if we're able to improve them and we have kind of an idea of where maybe we want to go eventually with certain products, how can we release a product that is complete, that gives everybody, you know, the features that we promise, that we talk about, but then keep going from there, continually push ourselves to squeeze more out of what that product is. That whole philosophy is a top-down philosophy within Lumix, and it kind of has been since day one. You know, build the best product you can, build it so that it serves the user and isn't something that is wholly just about, you know, making money. If you look at Panasonic as a company, right? The I don't want to say parent company, but like the actual company, Panasonic. Our founder, one of his biggest, you know, kind of points, and I'm gonna butcher the quotes, so I'm not even gonna try, but the basic philosophy was that it is your responsibility as a company to do good for the world, to do good for the creators, to do good for the, and when you take that from a really high level philosophical perspective and you bring that to the products that you make, the same story should hold true, is that if you are building something, it should be for the benefit of that person. If it's a TV, a microwave, a light bulb adapter, which was the first product we ever made, and then into the cameras, that philosophy just runs through everything that we do. And in the camera side, you get to see it more, because that's where you have firmware updates and things that, you know, maybe you didn't think were possible originally become possible as your knowledge and experience grows as an engineer, as a developer, as a product planner. It's one of the main reasons why I was super excited to be able to work for Lumix, is that I actually believed in the messaging that we, you know, they at the time that they were saying, because I wasn't involved, in how we address products and how we are continually trying to improve them. And yeah, that's kind of where it goes.
And especially because there's like so many different cameras out there where it's like the S1H is a great example of like, that's a camera that's pretty much a killer camera. It's been like all the way up until the S5 IIX. The S5 IIX gets released basically with similar-ish specs, but with phase detect autofocus, and it's a very similar camera, but that camera was like a camera ahead of its time. And I feel like with a lot of Lumix cameras, it's designed to be ahead of its time, with room to grow, with firmware updates. You know, the S5 IIX getting with the proxy, the camera to cloud, the IBIS features weren't even fully on there with the electronic standard and high stabilization until the G9 Mark II, or like the OG G9 getting 4K 24 frames and 30 frames and 10-bit unlocked like 4 years later. Like, it's kind of nice, like knowing as a consumer personally myself, and I know a lot of my friends mention this too. It's like you buy a camera and then that camera gets better with time instead of like another camera coming, getting released and being like, oh, here's this new camera. And you're like, that's basically my camera just with a firmware update. Why are you making me spend another like $2,000, which it's expensive for people to like just drop money like again and again. This is a question that kind of just popped up in my mind though, I guess, as you were speaking, was the S9 kind of envisioned when the S5 II got released, like in the roadmap, like internally speaking, because then you have somewhere like where ish we're going.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing I think that people don't understand in the industry is that product development cycles are actually quite long. So I can relate this back to like the GH6 announcement with how long that took to come out, right? I think that was about like 6 years for that camera to come out in its entirety for a proper update. And the development plan for the GH6 started like the second the GH5 released. So it's a long development cycle. And we knew at that point that, you want to have an update for it and things like that. So when you relate a timeline like that and then obviously we had, COVID in there and all of that headache with adding extra years to announcements. When you look at S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, and then S9, yeah, those products have been in plan. Some can come to, I would say, like fruition a little bit faster in some cases. Like with the S9, when we actually made the announcements for the Mark IIs, the S9 was a concept of like, we want to build a smaller camera. We get a lot of questions globally about flat type cameras or the rangefinder styled bodies. And we felt that now with the S5 Mark II, we have the general capabilities within that camera to actually size it down and, kind of give it its own, flavor within the industry. Enough that it can differentiate itself from an S5 Mark II or a Mark IIX. And yeah, it kind of just went from there. So in that case, probably a shorter development cycle than some of the other, much higher level cameras. Like, when we look at again, I guess really like the best examples like GH5 to GH6, that was a really long time, but then GH6 to GH7 was a really short time because we knew where we wanted to go, and then the G9 Mark II kind of showed us hardware-wise what we were able to kind of tweak and adjust and make better for the GH7. So it all kind of varies, but we don't typically stick to we have to have a camera out every 2 years, every year, every 6 months, like any of that stuff, because that actually is counterintuitive to innovation, because you're then forced into that logic of, well, you know what? Got to get a new camera out. I don't care if it's a minor little change between the two. Like that camera's coming out. Planning is done. You'll have some situations where like a product will come out and maybe it baffles, general market, general users. But when you take a step back, you realize that, well, it was probably built for a specialized purpose, like GH5S, box cameras, things like that. Like they're more specialized products, so they're an exception to the rule, not the rule itself. And I think that's kind of one of the things you look at with like the S5D that was announced for the European and some other markets. It's a specialized release. It's not necessarily something that is, full blown, everywhere is going to have it kind of thing. And that's one of the reasons why, like, I didn't even talk about it on the announcement yesterday, because it's a minor product.
And wasn't it just also announced there's like, I'm going to call it just the BS1H Mark II, because I don't know the AW 4D or 50, whatever it's actually properly called. But there was just recent announcements of the box style box style flagship, but like a box style full frame and a box style Micro Four Third updates to the BS1H2, which is also, there's like no announcements or anyone really talking online about those cameras because, like you said, they have very specific needs and updates in those cameras.
Exactly. One of the largest use cases that we had for the box cameras when we announced them was multicam productions, was higher level applications where these production studios or venues needed the ability to take that camera, mix it in with our PTZ options, mix it in with our control solutions. And when we kind of just took a step back and really looked at this, because our Pro AV or our Pro AV division is the same as our consumer division now. Basically, it was like, well, these products make more sense to be under their umbrella. So here, you guys can take them. They added, things like NDI and more industry standardized specifications and compatibilities that for that use case were required. And the reality is, in that side of the world, you rarely see a lot of social posts about stuff like that, because it's people that are, this is going to sound horribly wrong, but it's people that are actually out doing work and just like they don't have time for social, because what they're doing is not necessarily like sexy in the world of social. So it's like, it's a tool. I'm using it. I'm deploying it, and it's cool. And those are people that are buying like 20 cameras at a clip because of their deployments. So that's why you don't hear much about them.
And I feel like the marketing world, and let me preface this by saying the YouTube social media world, everyone just wants the perfect camera, SDI, XLR, everything in it for $3,000. And you're like, oh my gosh, chill, first off. But I think backstepping too, it's like with the firmware updates, it's great that you guys are like pitting all of these things in cameras over time and like kind of giving more value to the consumer. But then I also think it's like a hardware perspective, like you were mentioning, from the S5 to the S9, it's probably just figuring out how to get all that firmware and pin it in this little tiny camera. So it's putting all of that kind of that hardware in a smaller package and a smaller design, which does take time. I know I've talked to Caleb Hoover on the show before talking about the GH6 from the GH5, how as consumers we kept saying, give us this camera now, give us this camera now, give us this camera now. But then it's like, okay, if we waited, would we have all been more happy if we waited one more year and it had face detect in the GH6 instead of the GH7, which is totally fine. That's in the GH7 now. But like, if we were all like, all right, let's stop bugging them because they're going to make the product even better if we just give them more time to make that product better instead of being like, give us the product, give us the product, give us the product. What's kind of your perspective on that when it's like the consumers are all like, we want it now, and you're like, if you wait just a little bit longer, it'll be even 100 times better. Just trust.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% empathize with people wanting, updates. It's always cool to, have the latest and greatest, camera equipment. I mean, look at what happens in the phone industry, right? Every year, almost every year you have new phones come out. As much as I want to be able to just blanket say like, look, if people just wait and have some faith or some patience, whatever you want to call it, the cameras are going to come out and they're going to get better and you're going to get, things that you want. It's just not a realistic thing to expect of people, because it's human nature to want the next greatest thing. I believe it is, at least. So from that particular sense, it puts camera manufacturers, I think, in a hard spot, because we're trying to do everything we can to serve, you, the user, to the best that we possibly can. And at the same time, it's not a fair expectation of someone like in my position in social media, in marketing, to also expect that everybody in the market is going to, have these understandings of, well, development takes time. Writing software takes time. It may sound like these things are easy from the outside, but then when you really kind of dig into it and you realize that you have, a ton of engineers spending hours on end, thousands of hours writing code, running simulation models on chassis of cameras, like all that stuff. that's a level that you just can't expect people to understand. So because that's not something that we can explain in an easy term, people get frustrated. And then unfortunately, you have an entire side of the industry, like you pointed out on YouTube and some other places, where hype is built up that is not hype being built up by the manufacturer, that alters people's expectations. And there's only ever so much that we can do with that, but ultimately in the end, the brand is the one that gets the negative view from things like that. So it's tough. The best I think that you do is you just kind of like, hey, look at our track record. When we release products when they're ready, when there is a reason to have it released, we're not chasing units, like turnover in units. We're trying to build the best products that you possibly can.
And I feel like the S9 is a great example. I don't know if you're the one who said this or if it was someone else, but that the S9, with all the YouTube drama that was going on and like the public opinion, at least in the States, was not the best, but it was also one of the best-selling cameras in Japan, I believe,
Yeah.
on or around launch, which is like, okay,
Still
obviously
is.
it's not just the filmmaking camera. It's not designed to be a professional camera. With the unlimited recording, you might be able to do some fun stuff, but it's kind of a camera that's designed for specific people and like specific needs. And like you were saying earlier, like with the box cameras or the GH5S, they are designed cameras with specific needs in mind. Now, kind of pivoting from hardware, firmware, cameras, all that stuff, you work with a lot of the influencers, the marketing side of all of that. What advantages do you kind of see from influencer marketing from your perspective? But then also, what are kind of the advantages as influencers? I hate that word. As just people who create content on YouTube or social media. What advantages do you see from both sides?
Yeah, so probably the biggest advantage from my side of this conversation is that, one, it's a wider breadth of people and experiences that they have to share from a product perspective, right? There's way more ideas. There's cooler concepts. There's a wider breadth of opinions that are shared. So unlike excuse me, more traditional kind of concepts where it's like, hey, I'm going to hire an agency, here's our vision, this is what we want to see, put this content out, we get a lot more stuff published out there that, one, we don't have to really do much work for. And I know that sounds maybe a little odd coming, because it's like, yeah, we get the benefits and we don't have to do much work, but it's actually really just the concept of like, I don't have to have a hand in that stuff being created. All I have to do is say, hey, here's the product. I feel that this product is probably going to fit best with what myself and the creator have spoken about, what you want in the camera. I think this is the best one that we have in the lineup that kind of fits what you're looking for. Here you go create some cool stuff. If we end up, going to that next level to say like, hey, we actually want to pay you to do, a piece about it, then cool, those conversations can happen. But it really just makes it a more genuine piece of content that's out there, because again, and I reiterate this a lot, we have zero control over content that people publish unless we specifically go into a situation and say, hey, I want to sponsor a video or sponsor an article with you. We try to just be like, hey, you do your thing. If you need help or support or things like that, we're a resource for you. On the flip side of it, for the creators that want to get into this, I think the benefit for them, for people like yourself, I think is, one, you get access to gear, which is a cool thing. I mean, I think all of us love access to gear because it's one less thing we have to financially worry about to create something. But depending on the company you work for, most of the time you're gonna get the freedom to just be like, hey, I have this cool idea, do you think I can execute this? All I would want from you is a camera. Well, yeah, sure, if you got a cool idea, here you go. As long as it's not something that like goes against a company stance or policy or things like that. Like, companies are still pretty conservative in that stance. Like, we get really careful about what kind of content we want to tie ourselves to. So from that creator's perspective, you get access to a brand, you get access to relationships within those brands where eventually they grow to the point where your input actually can start to change things in the future. Case in point, the multi-aspect ratio frame markers that came in the S9. I mean, you were there when we did the Creator Summit thing, and everyone was talking about, hey, we'd love to see this. That meeting is what basically brought that to fruition.
I don't know. I remember saying I was one of those people. I'm like, yeah, multiple frame markers, give us. And I remember specifically messaging someone within the company saying like, here's how it could work super easily, and it's pretty much just that in a sense. I mean, would it be cool? I don't think this is, maybe it's possible. You could tell me right now if it's possible or not. Would it be cool to turn on or have like function buttons that turns on this frame marker, this frame marker, this frame marker versus just turn on all versus turn on off all? That could be cool. That might be just too much work because it's like, all right, how many function buttons are you going to custom for 3 extra function buttons versus everything on, everything off? But
yeah, but that's kind of like the cool thing though, right? Is that because these cameras, they're just computers. I know that's pretty reductive on it, but you can pretty much have an idea and say like, hey, this would be a cool way to interact with it. And I think our track record has shown that the engineering team and the software team are open to those ideas. Some of them are, to your point, they're a little too complicated, or when you actually think about it, the user experience would be pretty terrible because of how much you'd have to devote to it. But they always take it and try.
I think that was like a special moment, like during the Lumix Collective event, having that time, getting to talk to the engineers themselves or with like their translators too. But having our ideas being listened to, or having people coming back to us like one-on-one talking about specific things, or like something that I feel like not a lot of companies are really doing or doing at a bigger scale. Slightly pivoting before we kind of land the plane with these conversations here is there was only, correct me if I'm wrong, how many Lumix Globit Summit events have there been?
So we've only done 2. S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, and then the S9 event. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's only been one Lumix Collective event. Do you see this being something in the future with all the YouTube US drama happening? Do you see this being something that Lumix potentially might continue doing forward with the Lumix Collective, or potentially the Global Summit or something like that in the farther future?
Yeah, I mean, when appropriate, yeah, I fully envision that the collective style events, or if there's a product kind of thing that we would try to collect as many people together as we can so that we can show them the product. I think yeah, there's a lot of drama around that kind of concept, but I think it's a lot of perspective as to why a company would do that. For one, I know we get a lot of commentary about like, Panasonic flew a bunch of people to Japan to show them the new camera, and whether you're happy about the camera or not, that's a totally different thing. But what I think a lot of people don't realize is that, one, we're a Japanese-based company. It's where our headquarters are. It is cheaper for us to do an event in Japan and fly everybody in than it is to go somewhere else, because all of our resources are in Japan. So stuff like that, we think, we'll probably continue. There's always going to be people that are, I'd say maybe put off by it or annoyed or feel left out because they don't get that opportunity. But to be fair, everyone that's ever come to these kinds of events or that participates in any of the other companies' types of events like this, those people work themselves to get there. They've proven themselves as creators. People like yourself. You put yourself in a position where you're recognized by companies, where the company values your opinion, and the goal, at least from our stuff, is always like, hey, we're going to bring you here, we're going to show you the product, we're going to give you the information about it, and go ahead, go have fun around the city. We're around if you've got questions. That's our logic with it. And the creator summits, that's just a bit, a little bit more of a different thing. That's more of a like, hey, this is a bit more of like an appreciation thing for the content that people create, and an opportunity to share insights within the product and the brand, and give you guys an opportunity to speak to people like engineers or marketing or sales teams.
And I think like the S9 is like the greatest example. It's like the GH7 obviously announced 1 month later, and the GH7 could have been the Japan event or Japan trip. But I think it's great that like Lumix, specifically in my perspective, showed off this camera instead of the GH7 in Japan, because it's like, this camera is literally designed for travel. This camera is designed to shoot like a bunch of things. And it's like something that's interesting. It's like, I didn't see any photos from people that went to Japan on the S9 with banding issues, and it has no electronic shutter, and there's a ton of lights everywhere. And it's like, we were all shooting at night, and I saw no issues.
Yeah. It I think really kind of throws that point of people like, oh, if it doesn't have an electronic shutter, or if it doesn't have a mechanical shutter, it's garbage for photography. It's like, well, pose that question to all the people that are actually out there taking photos with this camera, and it's not a problem.
Yeah, I've done sports photography with this.
Yeah, I honestly think that mentality is a byproduct of the kind of toxic YouTube comment section side, because you have all the brand loyalty, you have all the brand fans and things like that, and it exists for every brand. This is not a knock on any individual brand or any individual person. Mob mentality exists, and the second someone goes in there and it's like, yeah, this isn't for me, so it's got to be garbage, it becomes an echo chamber. The fact of the matter is, like you said, I've maybe had an experience of banding in light situations once, and that was in a terrible lighting scenario. Massively mixed, sodium vapor lights and fluorescents and LEDs all mixed in one thing. And like, yeah, okay, that happens, but you just click, change shutter speed, and I'm good to go. But yeah, the internet's a funny thing.
DSLR movement too, from people that are like, shutter technology is going to develop over time to the period where maybe, and I'm not an engineer by any means, but like maybe by a time where it's like no one would notice a difference if that photo was taken with a camera with a shutter or without a shutter, and no one's going to even know a difference now. So this is going to be a little bit different. So before we kind of land the plane with the last and final question, since you aren't really a social media influencer like all my other guests, plug whatever you want to shout out or say, or if it's your own Instagram, feel free that too.
So I am active on social. For anybody that wants to check out what I do or anything like that, I am SMR Photo 87 on Instagram. I know it's such a millennial username, but honestly, go check out the Discord. Your Discord. I just recently joined in there, so I'm super excited to see everyone that's on the Discord there. And I troll around on Reddit, on Facebook, on Instagram. So if you ever see a Sean at Lumix, that's me. Feel free to chat with me. If you're venturing to Miami this weekend for Adobe Max, I'll be there. Anyone that chooses to venture to Miami. This
video is probably going to be going after that, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, there you go. If you were at Max, I was there. Hopefully you came by at that time.
So, Sean, my audience will get upset if I don't ask this question. So I have to do this on good faith of my audience. What's that next Lumix camera?
Well, I am so glad you asked that question. The next Lumix camera that we've got coming is eventually coming.
I appreciate that. Dude, the clickbait's going so hard right now.
No,
okay.
Look, stuff's always coming. Stuff's always in plan. We have a long cycle of stuff that, you know, is in plan and working its way through the process of showing to the light of day. So
I guess that's kind of is the last question, not the camera, but what's kind of just on the horizon as a whole for Panasonic Lumix, you know, going for the future, not specifically like next camera, next firmware, like nothing like that, but just as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're gonna consistently or constantly, you know, keep looking to find better ways to serve creatives, serve photographers, videographers. I think one of the biggest challenges I know that we have as a brand is the recognition within the photographic side, right? Everyone knows us as video because we've, you know, kind of cut our teeth on that, but we've been doing a lot of efforts to kind of bring to light a lot of our photographic strengths, you know, live composite, high-res shot mode, all those kinds of things there. So that also means that we're working with a lot more photographers. I know the videographers are going to be like, well, why? You should be working with us. But fact is, any camera that you buy or any camera that you will buy in the future, they're all hybrid. So photographers are equally as important. And yeah, that's kind of what a lot of what we're doing in the future, just constantly working to build a better product, to build a better experience, and just be a better company for photographers, videographers, and, you know, creators.
Anyways, if you guys want to check out another episode on how you can use your Lumix S9 professionally speaking, check out that episode right there. YouTube recommends you might like this episode right here. Till next one, guys. Peace.